The Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were ancient when humanity was still learning to make fire. Their empire stretched across 40 star systems, and they believed themselves to be the masters of all creation. Other species were nothing to them, just insects to be stepped on or ignored. When human colony ships first arrived at the planet called HFY 30 years ago, they watched with cold eyes. They did not attack. They did not welcome. They simply observed the way a person might watch ants building a hill in their garden. Amusing, perhaps, certainly not important. HFY was a beautiful world. Green forests covered the northern continents. Clear rivers cut through golden plains. The soil was rich, and precious minerals waited beneath the surface. The first colonists had wept with joy when they saw it from orbit. Finally, a new home among the stars. Over 3 decades, the colony grew. Small landing sites became towns. Towns became cities. Farmers worked the land. Miners dug into the mountains. Schools opened. Children were born who had never seen Earth, who called HFY their only home. By the time of the attack, 2.3 million human beings lived there. Teachers and doctors, engineers and artists, grandparents and newborn bobbies. A small piece of humanity growing in the light of an alien sun. Doctor had lived on HFY for 15 years. She worked at the Colonial Hospital in New Meridian, the largest city on the planet. Her daughter, Sophia, was 12 years old and wanted to be a starship pilot. That morning, had kissed Sophia goodbye and told her to finish her homework before playing with her friends. It was the last thing she would ever say to her child. The fleet arrived at noon. There was no warning, no demands, no chance to surrender or negotiate. 12 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began their attack. The Colonial Defense Force, 3 small patrol ships, was destroyed in the first minute. The orbital stations followed seconds later. Then the bombardment began. Was in her office when the first explosions shook the city. She ran to the window and saw fire falling from the sky. Plasma bombs, antimatter missiles, weapons designed to kill everything and leave nothing behind. Buildings she had known for years vanished in columns of flame. The screaming started then, and it did not stop for 3 days. They were thorough. They did not simply bomb the cities. They released poisons into the atmosphere. They targeted the farmlands with biological weapons that turned crops to ash. They hunted down fleeing vehicles with precision strikes. Every shelter was found. Every bunker was cracked open. Archon commanded the fleet from his flagship. He was 300 years old, ancient even by standards, and he had performed many corrections in his long life. This was simply another. The humans had built where they were not permitted. The humans had taken resources that belonged to the Dominion. The humans needed to be removed, like weeds from a garden. He felt nothing as he watched the planet burn. Why would he? They were just humans. On the second day, broadcast a message to the dying colony. His voice was calm, almost bored. You built where you were not permitted. This is correction. Your species should learn from this lesson. Do not expand where you do not belong. Heard that message from the cargo hold of a freighter called the Meridian's Hope. She had made it to the spaceport through luck and desperation. A pilot she knew had refused to leave without filling his ship with survivors. They had taken off under fire, engines screaming, while plasma beams cut the sky around them. There were 847 people on board, had searched every face, called her daughter's name until her voice broke. Sophia was not among them. Sophia was still down there, somewhere in the burning ruins of New Meridian. The Meridian's Hope jumped to hyperspace just as the last city fell. Behind them, HFY was dying. The atmosphere was turning toxic. The oceans were boiling. In another day, nothing would be left alive on the surface. 2.3 million human beings, gone. Sat in the cargo hold with the other survivors. Some were crying. Some were silent, staring at nothing. A young boy kept asking for his mother. No one answered him. No one could. In her hands held a data core. Before the attack, she had been backing up hospital records, but as the bombing started, she had changed what she was recording. Hours of footage, falling bombs, burning cities, the faces of the dead and dying, every moment of the massacre preserved forever. She did not know why she had done it. Perhaps she wanted evidence. Perhaps she wanted the galaxy to see what they had done. Perhaps she simply could not look away. 3 weeks later, the Meridian's Hope limped into Earth's solar system. The ship was damaged and barely holding together. The survivors were weak from hunger and grief, but they had made it home. Was taken directly to the United Earth Council. She stood before the leaders of humanity, still wearing the same clothes she had worn during the escape, and she played the recordings. The chamber was silent as they watched. They saw New Meridian explode. They saw people running through burning streets. They saw children crying for parents who would never come. They saw the ships hanging in the sky like gods of death, raining fire without mercy. When the recording of message played, several council members had to leave the room. When it was over, spoke. Her voice was empty, hollowed out by grief. They killed everyone, my daughter, my friends, my patients, everyone, and they called it correction, like we were a mistake that needed to be fixed. Fleet Admiral was 60 years old. He had served humanity his entire adult life. He had seen conflicts and crises, but nothing like this, nothing even close. He stood up slowly. How many ships do they have? A military analyst answered. Approximately 4,000 combat vessels spread across their territory, Admiral. Looked around the room. He looked at the frozen image on the screen, a city in flames, people dying in the streets. He looked at Doctor, standing alone with her data core and her grief. Then we send 60,000. The room erupted. People shouted questions, objections, disbelief. 60,000 ships. Humanity did not have 60,000 ships. The official fleet numbered only 8,000. Where would 60,000 ships come from? Admiral waited for silence. When it came, he spoke again. For 200 years we have prepared for this day, not this exact day, but a day like it, a day when someone would try to destroy us. We have built shipyards in secret, factories hidden in asteroid belts, forge worlds that have worked without rest for generations. We have 60,000 warships waiting. We have always had them. We simply hoped we would never need them. He turned to face the screen one last time, the image of Harvest Ivy burning. They believe they taught us a lesson today. They believe we will mourn our dead and accept our place in the galaxy. His voice hardened to steel. They are wrong. They did not teach us a lesson. They made a mistake. The worst mistake any species has ever made. He looked at, we will not forget Harvest Ivy. We will not forgive what was done there. And we will make certain, absolutely certain, that no one ever does this to humanity again. Across human space, the message went out. The Forge Worlds began their final preparations. The hidden fleets powered up their engines for the first time. Humanity was going to war. The galaxy had always underestimated humanity. They saw a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel. They saw small colonies scattered across a handful of worlds. They saw modest patrol fleets designed for defense, not conquest. They looked at humans and saw weakness. They never saw what was hiding in the dark. The first generation of human leaders who reached the stars had learned something important from history. Earth's past was written in blood, world wars, genocides, nuclear weapons pointed at cities full of children. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times before finally uniting and reaching for the stars. Those leaders understood a simple truth: the universe would not be kind. Somewhere out there, species existed who would look at humanity the way humanity had once looked at animals: resources to be used, obstacles to be removed, prey to be hunted. So they prepared. They built the official fleet, 8,000 ships, enough to protect the colonies and patrol human space. That was what they showed the galaxy. That was what they had seen. But behind that public face, the real work was happening. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, automated shipyards worked without rest. Massive facilities carved into rocks the size of small moons, building warships by the thousand. The workers were mostly machines, controlled by artificial minds that asked no questions and kept no secrets. Around Saturn, factory stations turned the gas giants' moons into weapons. Missiles by the million, plasma cannons, shield generators, armor plating strong enough to survive direct hits from antimatter bombs. In the cold darkness beyond Neptune, the Forge worlds waited. Entire artificial planets dedicated to one purpose, building the ships that humanity hoped it would never need. For 200 years, this work continued. Generation after generation of human leaders kept the secret. The galaxy must not know. If enemies saw humanity's true strength, they might attack before the fleet was ready. So the ships were built in silence. Crews were trained in secret bases, and humanity smiled at the galaxy and pretended to be weak. Now the pretending was over. Captain James stood on the observation deck of the battleship Unconquered and watched the fleet assemble. He was 45 years old, a career officer with 20 years of service. He had thought he knew the strength of human military power. He had been wrong. Ships filled the space around Neptune. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands upon thousands. Destroyers moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor. Carriers launched and recalled fighters in endless training exercises. Dreadnoughts, massive vessels bristling with weapons, took their positions at the heart of the fleet. And still more ships arrived. Every hour, new formations dropped out of hyperspace, from the asteroid shipyards, from the Saturn factories, from the Forge worlds in the outer dark. The fleet grew and grew until the sensors could barely count them all. 60,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled by any species in known galactic history. A young ensign named Tors joined at the observation window. She was fresh from the academy, barely 22 years old. This would be her first real deployment. "Captain," she said softly, "are we really going to war over one colony?" Did not answer immediately. He thought about his brother David, who had moved to Harvest Ivy 8 years ago. David had married a woman named. They had 2 children, and little Emma, who had just turned 5, had been planning to visit them next year. Now they were all dead, burned alive in the bombardment or poisoned by the atmosphere that had destroyed. 2.3 million people, including his brother's entire family. "Not one colony," he finally said. "Our people, our family, they murdered them and called it correction. They think we will cry for a while and then forget. They think humans are soft because we build schools instead of weapons. They think we are weak because we prefer peace." He turned to face the young ensign. His eyes were hard. "They killed our children, Tors. They burned our people alive and they felt nothing. Now they will learn what humanity does when someone hurts our family. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not stop until the debt is paid." Tors looked back at the massive fleet. Understanding dawned on her face. "They have no idea what is coming, do they?" No, they truly do not. Far across the galaxy, the Dominion received intelligence about the human mobilization. Scouts reported thousands of ships gathering near the human. The numbers seemed impossible, ridiculous. Clearly, the scouts had made an error. Archon read the reports in his command chamber and laughed. 4,000 ships had conquered empires. They had crushed species far more advanced than these humans. The idea that these primitives could threaten the Dominion was absurd. He sent a message to Earth through diplomatic channels. His tone was dismissive, almost amused. "Your tantrum is noted. The Dominion has tolerated your expansion long enough. You will disperse your fleet immediately and accept your place in the galactic order. Further resistance will result in the correction of your itself. You have 30 days to comply." Admiral read the message on the bridge of his flagship, the Remembrance. The ship had been named in the hours after the harvest recordings played. Its hull was painted with the names of every settlement that had been destroyed, thousands of names in letters small enough to fit, covering the entire vessel. Smiled grimly. 30 days, the expected humanity to back down in 30 days. They would be in space in 10. The fleet made its final preparations. Ammunition was loaded. Systems were tested. Crews said goodbye to families they might never see again. Across human space, billions of people watched the news feeds and prayed for the men and women about to depart for war. On the day of departure, Admiral addressed the entire fleet. His voice reached 60,000 ships, millions of sailors and soldiers ready to fight. 2 months ago, the murdered 2.3 million of our people, men, women, and children who wanted nothing more than to live in peace. The Dominion called it correction. They called our dead weeds to be pulled from their garden. He paused, letting the anger build. They believe they know war. They have spent 12,000 years conquering species weaker than themselves. They have forgotten what it means to fight an enemy that does not surrender. They have forgotten what it means to face a people united by grief and rage. His voice rose. Today, we remind them. Today, we teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. Humanity does not abandon its children. Humanity does not accept extinction. And humanity does not let murderers go unpunished. He gave the command. All ships jumped to hyperspace. 60,000 drives ignited simultaneously. The flash of light was visible across the solar system, a wall of fire stretching from Neptune to the distant stars. Ships vanished one by one, jumping toward space, toward vengeance, toward a war that would reshape the galaxy. Back on Earth, Doctor watched the fleet depart from a viewing platform in Geneva. She had wanted to go with them. She had begged to be given a place on any ship, any role that would let her see the brought low, but they had refused. The war needed warriors, not grieving doctors. She stood alone as the last ships disappeared into hyperspace. Somewhere in that fleet were the people who would avenge her daughter. Somewhere in that fleet was justice. "I remember you, Sophia," she whispered to the empty sky. "I will always remember." The largest war in galactic history had begun. Prime was a fortress world. For 3,000 years, it had guarded the approaches to the core systems. No enemy had ever breached its defenses. No attacker had ever survived long enough to threaten the stations that orbited its dead surface. 1,200 warships patrolled the system. Massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons powerful enough to crack planets. 3 battle stations, each the size of small moons, formed a triangle of death around the main approach routes. The commander, Grand Admiral, believed his position was unbreakable. Then the humans arrived. The first wave dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, watched his sensors light up with contacts. He counted them carefully. 5,000 ships, a significant force but nothing the fortress could not handle. Then the second wave arrived, and the third, and the fourth. Wave after wave of human ships appeared. They filled the sensor screens until individual contacts became impossible to track. The numbers kept climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. The officers stared at their displays in disbelief. When the final count reached 55,000, the fleet had left some ships behind to guard the supply lines. Grand Admiral sent an urgent message to the Dominion. "The humans, there are thousands of them, tens of thousands. Our intelligence was wrong. Our intelligence was catastrophically wrong. We need reinforcements immediately." No reinforcements would come in time. Admiral studied the fortress defenses from the Bridge of the Remembrance. They had arranged themselves in a classic defensive formation, ships protecting the stations, stations protecting the approach routes. It was elegant. It was time-tested. It was designed to fight enemies who were afraid to die. "All commands," said calmly, "begin the attack." The human fleet surged forward like a tide of steel. They fought well. Their ships were advanced, their crews well-trained. Plasma beams cut through human destroyers. Missiles found carriers and ripped them apart. The battle stations unleashed weapons that had destroyed entire fleets in centuries past. But humanity did not stop. When a human destroyer was crippled, its captain did not surrender. He aimed his dying ship at the nearest enemy and accelerated. When fighters ran out of missiles, their pilots crashed into gun positions. When marine boarding craft were shot down, the survivors in escape pods still tried to reach enemy ships with cutting tools and grenades. Captain led the unconquered into the heart of the formation. His ship took hit after hit. Decks decompressed. Crew members died at their stations. The engineers sealed compartments around themselves and kept the engines running even as fires burned through the corridors. A cruiser moved to finish them off, ordered ramming speed. The unconquered slammed into the enemy vessel at full acceleration. Both ships died in a bloom of fire, but had ejected his surviving crew minutes before. Escape pods scattered through the battle, their passengers still fighting with side arms and improvised explosives. They had never seen anything like it. They were warriors, yes, but they were also civilized. They understood victory and defeat. They understood when a battle was lost and retreat was wise. Humans did not retreat. Humans did not accept defeat. Humans kept fighting until they were dead, and sometimes they kept fighting even after that. Grand Admiral watched his fleet crumble. His 1,200 ships had become 800, then 500, then 200. The battle stations were surrounded, their weapons overwhelmed by sheer numbers. One by one, they went dark. He sent a message to the human flagship. "You have proven your strength. Let us discuss terms of surrender. The Dominion will negotiate fairly. Further bloodshed serves no purpose." Admiral's response was a single word: no. Then the missiles came. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Prime was silent. Every ship had been destroyed. Every station was debris. Every soldier was dead. The cost to humanity was staggering. 4,200 ships lost. Over 300,000 human beings killed in a single day of fighting. More casualties than they had inflicted on all their enemies in 1,000 years. But 55,000 ships had arrived. Now there were 51,000, more than enough to finish what they had started. Admiral ordered a single escape pod to be recovered from the wreckage. Inside was a junior officer named As, barely conscious from his injuries. He was brought to the bridge of the Remembrance and made to stand before the Admiral. "You will carry a message to your Archon," said. His voice was cold and steady. "Tell him what you saw here. Tell him that Harvest Ivy is remembered. Tell him that we are coming for him. And tell him this." He leaned close to the trembling. "We have 55,000 ships remaining. If he kills every last one of them, we will build 55,000 more. If he destroys Earth, the colonies will send their own fleets. Humanity will never stop, never surrender, never forgive. We will hunt the Dominion across the galaxy until every ship is ash and every world that ordered the death of our children is silent." He straightened. "Tell him that. Tell him humans are coming. And then pray to whatever gods your people worship, because nothing else is going to save you." The escape pod was launched toward Dominion space. As made the journey in a state of shock. He had been raised to believe they were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. He had been taught that other species were inferior, weak, easily conquered. Now he had seen the truth. He had watched humans crash their ships into battle stations rather than retreat. He had seen pilots eject toward enemy vessels with nothing but grenades and knives. He had witnessed a species that fought not with strategy alone, but with something far more dangerous: rage, grief, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. When his pod reached the Dominion, As delivered his message to Archon personally. He described the battle. He described the human tactics. He described the look in Admiral's eyes, the look of a man who would burn the entire galaxy to avenge his people. For the first time in 300 years, Archon felt fear. The humans were not coming to negotiate. They were not coming to teach a lesson or establish boundaries. They were coming to destroy every ship, every station, every who had participated in the attack on Harvest Ivy. The Dominion had poked what they thought was a small, harmless creature. They had discovered too late that it was a sleeping giant. And now that giant was awake, wounded, and very, very angry. Looked at the star maps showing human fleet movements. They were already advancing toward the next system. They would not stop at the border. They would not accept tribute or apology. They were coming for everything. "How do we fight an enemy like this?" one of his advisors asked. Had no answer. For 12,000 years, the Dominion had never faced an enemy that could not be conquered, intimidated, or destroyed. Now they faced humanity. And humanity was not afraid. The human fleet did not slow down. After the victory at Prime, Admiral gave his forces 2 days to repair and regroup. Then they moved again, deeper into space, closer to the heart of the Dominion. System by system, the Empire fell. They tried to mount defenses. They gathered fleets at strategic points. They fortified worlds. They called in ships from distant outposts, leaving their borders weak to concentrate strength against the human advance. It was not enough. At the battle of 3,000 ships met the human fleet. The fighting lasted 4 days. When it was over, the fleet was scattered wreckage. Humanity lost 800 ships but kept moving forward. At the Siege of Station, the Dominion's largest military base made a desperate stand. The station's commander swore he would never surrender, that his warriors would fight to the last breath. He was true to his word. The station held for 2 weeks. Then human Marines breached the outer hull and fought their way inside, deck by deck, corridor by corridor. The commander died on his bridge with a human knife in his chest. The war raged for 18 months. Doctor had finally gotten her wish. After months of demanding a place in the fleet, Command had allowed her to join as a civilian advisor. She had no military training, no combat skills, but she knew the recordings. She knew every detail of what had been done to Harvest Ivy, and she knew that someone who had been there should witness the Dominion's fall. She traveled aboard a medical ship that followed behind the main fleet, treating the wounded from each battle. The stream of injured soldiers never stopped. Young men and women with missing limbs, with burns covering their bodies, with eyes that had seen too much death. She saved the ones she could. She held the hands of those she could not. One night after a particularly bloody engagement, Admiral visited the medical ship. He found in the observation deck, staring at the stars. Behind them, the wreckage of another fleet drifted in the void. "You should sleep, Doctor," said quietly. Did not turn around. "I cannot. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sophia. I see her running through the streets of New Meridian while fire falls from the sky. I see her calling for me, and I am not there." Stood beside her. He was exhausted too. 18 months of combat had aged him a decade. His hair had gone fully. His hands shook when he thought no one was watching. "Does watching them die make it better?" asked. Does seeing their ships burn make the pain less?" "No," admitted, "it does not." "Then why are we doing this? Why are we sacrificing so many more lives?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of command. "Because if we do not, they will do it again. Not just every species in the galaxy is watching this war. They are learning what happens when someone attacks humanity. They are learning that we will cross the stars to punish those who hurt us. That lesson, that fear, will protect our children for 1,000 years." He turned to face her. "I cannot bring back the dead, Doctor. Not the millions on Harvest Ivy, not the hundreds of thousands we have lost in this war, but I can make certain their deaths mean something. I can make certain no one ever considers attacking humanity again." Finally looked at him. Will it be worth it, all this blood? I do not know, said honestly. But I know the alternative. I know what happens to species that are seen as weak, that have destroyed dozens of civilizations that could not defend themselves. I will not let humanity join that list. Far across the Dominion, Archon watched his empire crumble. World after world fell silent. Fleet after fleet was destroyed. The humans showed no mercy to military targets. Every warship was hunted down. Every weapons factory was bombed. Every military base was captured or destroyed. But strangely, the civilian populations were left unharmed. Human ships flew past farming worlds without firing. Transports carrying refugees were allowed to flee. When ground forces captured cities, they protected the non-combatants and provided medical care to the wounded. Did not understand. In 12,000 years of conquest that had never spared civilians, war was total. The enemy was destroyed completely, soldiers, families, children, everything. That was how you ensured they never rose again. Yet humanity was different. They killed warriors without hesitation. They burned military fleets with apparent joy. But when a school was discovered in a combat zone, they sent soldiers to protect it. When a hospital was caught in crossfire, they risked their own people to evacuate the sick. It was as if they were saying, "We are not like you. We will not become monsters to defeat monsters." Found it infuriating and terrifying. His advisors came to him with desperate plans: surrender, negotiation, exile, but knew the humans would not accept any terms that left him alive. He had ordered the death of Harvest Ivy. He had called it correction. Admiral would never forgive that. So he made a different plan. Deep in the sacred archives of the Dominion, there was a weapon. It had been used only once, 8,000 years ago, against a species that had nearly defeated a device capable of destroying an entire planet in minutes. After its first use, the weapon had been locked away. The species it destroyed was erased from history. The worlds they had lived on became the Dominion's most forbidden territory, still poisoned after. Ordered the activated. His plan was simple and terrible. He would lure the human fleet to the sacred world of Al, where the nobility had ruled for 10,000 years. When the humans arrived, he would destroy the planet himself, along with most of their fleet. Yes, millions would die. Yes, the empire would be crippled, but humanity would be broken. Their fleet would be gone. Their will to fight would be shattered by a loss so enormous that they could never recover. It was madness. His own generals told him so, but was beyond reason now. He saw only revenge. He wanted humanity to burn, even if his own people burned with them. The trap was set, but did not know that humanity had spent 18 months learning everything about their codes had been broken. Their officers had been captured and questioned. Their computer systems had been hacked by human artificial minds that worked without rest. Captain, who had survived the destruction of the Unconquered and now commanded a new ship called the Second Chance, led a small team of intelligence officers. They found a communications officer willing to talk. They learned about the trap at Al. The information reached Admiral with hours to spare. He looked at the data and smiled grimly, thought he was clever, thought humans could be lured into a trap like animals. Was about to learn his final lesson about humanity. They did not walk into traps. They broke them. Al was the most sacred world in the Dominion. For 10,000 years, the greatest families had lived in its crystal towers. The Archons had ruled from its throne rooms. The temples held artifacts from 100 conquered civilizations. Now it was a trap. The waited in orbit, hidden among the defensive stations. Archon had evacuated his loyal followers and sacrificed the rest. Millions of ordinary still lived on the surface, unaware that their leader planned to murder them all. The human fleet arrived as expected, but they did not do what expected. Instead of gathering for a concentrated assault, the ships dispersed. They spread out into a massive sphere surrounding the entire system. Thousands of vessels, scattered so widely that no single weapon could destroy more than a handful, stared at his tactical display in confusion. This made no sense. The humans always attacked in tight formations, supporting each other with overlapping fire. Why were they spreading out? Then he understood. They knew. Somehow they knew they knew it needed a concentrated target to be effective. He slammed his fist against his command chair. How did they know? No one answered. No one had an answer. While raged, Admiral was executing the second part of his plan. A small force had broken off from the main fleet during the hyperspace jump. 12 ships, carrying the best Marines humanity had. Their target was the itself. Captain led the assault. His new ship, the Second Chance, was a converted assault carrier, fast, heavily armed, and filled with soldiers who had volunteered for a mission they might not survive. As the main fleet distracted, the force approached from its blind side. The weapon was enormous, a station the size of a small city, built around a core of ancient technology that they themselves barely understood. Its surface bristled with weapons, but most were pointed toward the planet below, not toward space. "All teams," said over the command channel, "begin boarding operations." Human launched from all 12 carriers. They raced toward the station through a storm of defensive fire. Some were destroyed. Most made it through. Breaching charges blew holes in this hull and Marines poured inside. The fighting was brutal. Warriors defended their weapon with desperate courage. The corridors were narrow, the spaces tight, perfect for close combat. Humans died in hand-to-hand fighting, struggling over every meter of ground. Fought at the front of his team. He had lost his brother's family on Harvest Ivy. He had watched his first ship destroyed at Prime. He had spent 18 months dreaming of this moment, the moment when he would look the architect of the massacre in the eyes. His team fought their way to the command center. They breached the door with explosives and stormed inside. Archon was waiting for them. The ancient stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the bodies of his guards. He had killed them himself when they suggested surrender. In his hand, he held a device, the trigger for the self-destruct. "You think you have won," Human said. His voice was calm, almost amused. "You have won nothing. I will destroy this station and your Marines with it. My people will remember me as a hero who refused to kneel." Raised his rifle, put down the trigger. "No," smiled. "Your species was a mistake. A correction was necessary. I only wish I had finished the job when I had the chance." His thumb moved toward the activation button. Fired. The first shot hit the trigger device, shattering it. The second hit his arm, spinning him around. The third, fourth, and fifth hit his personal shield, overwhelming it. The sixth hit his chest. Fell. Walked forward and stood over the dying Archon. The ancient leader looked up at him with hatred in his fatting eyes. "You are savages," whispered. "You have no culture, no history, just violence." Knelt beside him. "You killed 2 million civilians and called it correction. We destroyed your fleet and we are calling it justice." He leaned closer. "The difference is that we are not wrong. You murdered children in their beds. We killed warriors who chose to fight. You erased a colony because it was in your way. We dismantled your empire because you gave us no choice." He stood up. "And we are not savages. Savages would have killed everyone on Al. Savages would have bombed your cities and poisoned your worlds. We did not. We will not, because we are better than you." His last breath rattled in his throat. His eyes went dark. The was captured and disabled. Human engineers spent days making sure it could never fire again. Then they took it apart piece by piece, studying the technology, learning its secrets. Without the leadership collapsed. The remaining admirals and nobles surrendered one by one. They signed documents drafted by human diplomats, agreeing to terms that would have been unthinkable months before. The Dominion was dissolved. The 12,000-year empire ended not with a final glorious battle, but with a signature on a piece of paper. The war was over. 10 years passed. HFY had been rebuilt. New colonists had come, drawn by the memorial that stood at the center of New Meridian. The names of all 2.3 million dead were carved into walls of black stone, surrounding a garden where children played. Doctor visited every year on the anniversary of the attack. This year she brought her granddaughter, a bright-eyed girl of 7, named Sophia after the daughter had lost. Admiral stood beside her. He had retired after the war, his health broken by years of stress, but he always made this journey. He owed it to the dead. They stood in silence watching young Sophia play among the flowers. Around them, families walked through the memorial. Some wept, some smiled, all remembered. "Do you think it was worth it?" asked. The same question she had asked on the medical ship 18 months into the war. Watched the children playing. He thought of the hundreds of thousands of human soldiers who had died. He thought of the civilians who had lost everything when their empire fell. He thought of the galaxy, watching, learning, fearing. "The Dominion attacked us because they thought we were weak," he said slowly. "They killed our children because they believed we would not fight back. They were wrong. And now every species in the galaxy knows what happens when you attack humanity." He paused. "In the last 10 years, no one has threatened our colonies. No one has raided our ships. No one has even spoken harshly about our people. They remember what we did to they fear us." Shook her head. "Is that what we wanted, to be feared?" "No, we wanted to be safe. We wanted our children to grow up without worrying about alien fleets dropping from the sky. We wanted what every species wants to survive." He looked at young Sophia, laughing as she chased a butterfly through the garden. "The galaxy thought we were soft because we value life. They did not understand. We value life so much that we will burn down empires to protect it. We will cross the stars to avenge a single colony. We will fight until the last ship is destroyed, and then we will build more." He turned to, "They will never make the mistake of attacking us again. That is what HFY bought us. That is what our dead purchased with their lives. 1,000 years of peace, because no one will dare break it." Watched her granddaughter play. The sun was setting over HFY, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. In orbit above, human ships patrolled peacefully, guardians of a species that had proven itself willing to do anything to protect its own. "Humanity does not forget," she said quietly. "No," agreed, "and we do not forgive." The sun set on HFY. The memorial lights came on, illuminating the names of the dead. And in the garden, children played without fear. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Some sleeping giants should never be awakened.